start.
Okay, so this is what's the date today?
The 19th.
November 19th, 2023, Sydney Ordower's interview her father, Steve Ordower, about his work. Is that what you're doing?
There's a lot of different questions.
Oh, okay. Let's make sure that this lens is clean. Does it look pretty clean?
Yeah.
Okay. So, how do you, I mean, if you really wanted to do an interview style, you could say, thank you for being here.
Thank you for being here, Dad.
Okay. Okay.
Okay.
So you can start with your first question.
Okay, my first question is, how has an interfaith marriage had an impact on your life?
It's had no impact whatsoever. It was like the same thing as if I had married a Jew. No. How has it had an impact on my life? And that's still going, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just tap the bag. Okay, great. Which is still, I just want to make sure we're recording. It has made me, the main thing that it's had me do is exponentially increase my level of acceptance across the board with in humanity and all things, actually, because interfaith marriage is really a paradigm that it compels a person in an interfaith marriage to be accepting of their significant other, because particularly in my personal experience, because the Catholic experience is very different than a Jewish experience in a lot of ways, and so being Jewish and marrying someone from Austrian/German background is also a very different experience as well. So the level of acceptance that I've grown into is definitely something that I've noticed and appreciated. So yeah, that's just kind of scratching the surface in terms of, and other things about an interfaith marriage is that I've learned about, the differences. There's always differences among us, but there's you also realize there's so much that you have in common with folks that you otherwise wouldn't get to know, which has been a real blessing. So.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right. How did it feel to leave the old condo in the city to move to a house in a quiet suburb? How do you think this change affected our family?
Our family? Oh, well, it's funny. Okay. Well, personally, I never thought I could live in a suburb. I was always a city boy. I grew up in the city. I grew up in Hyde Park. But having a family shifted my perspective dramatically. I mean, just about everybody who has children says that. And for us, it was a shift in all the best ways. We became more peaceful. We had more time with you and Eli, for sure, because we had a lot less driving. I mean, just immediately our drive time on a day-to-day basis was cut down to a fraction of what it was. I mean, it was just insane. We would drive at least 2 to 3 hours a day just carting you guys around wherever, and it was very difficult to get around. There was a lot of tension in our bodies and in our minds as a result of being in traffic all the time in Chicago. It's not just being in traffic, it's being in traffic in Chicago, which is, the lights are shorter. There's more, there's way more opportunities to get a ticket for parking or speeding or going through a red light by accident because they're so short, and there's these speed traps that you don't even know are speed traps by parks. So it's one thing after another, and it just isn't a very friendly place in certain ways. So when we moved here, we got a lot more peaceful and a lot more grounded and a lot more connected. It was a lot healthier for us in just about every way, and we got to spend more time with you because we would get home late. And then Eli was in a really good, highly touted public school, but he was having homework every night in kindergarten. It was the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen. So there was just a lot of tension. all the time. So here, it's very, we're 5 minutes away from the school, and the schools are good, and we can count on them. And there are neighborhood schools, and that's where our property taxes go to. So we know our neighbors. We didn't really know our neighbors. There wasn't a sense of community in our neighborhood where we lived where we lived in the city, unfortunately. It's more transient young people. There were some families, but here and there. Here it's mainly families, and people are here for the long term. They're not just coming and going for the most part. And we've made some wonderful friends. We're so grateful for this community because we've met some very grounded, wonderful people here that is kind of our extended family just in this area. So, and when you and also the classroom sizes are smaller. You kids go to a public school, but still public school classroom sizes are usually around 30 plus. Here it's 20 or so, or even less sometimes. So that's another big thing. I could go on and on. So I guess that gives you an idea.
Okay. The next one is, what was the challenge of having kids, and what was the positive of having kids?
Challenge of having kids? Having kids is extremely confronting in just about every way. You are accountable for another human being, which is beautiful, because you grow into another level of adulthood. When you're accountable for another human being, it's amazing what comes out of you. And it's extremely confronting when you're young. At least for me, is I can just speak for myself and a lot of my male friends. It's the feeling of being tied down, and it's a confining type of thing that a lot of men are afraid of. But if you're with the right person, it's anything but. So, that's a really important decision, obviously. So, it's just extremely confronting because there's less time to do your own thing. So, one of the things that's really important in a marriage is and especially when you have kids, and it's not easy to do, is have your own sense of self and keep that intact to some whatever degree, because you're now in service of someone, your child or your children, and that's a beautiful thing. It's a wonderful thing. It's clearly one of the best things I've ever done in my life, hands down, and I'm grateful for that every day. But it is one of the toughest things I've ever done too, because you got to step in when things are on the line, and if you don't deliver, things are going to go sideways real quick. What was the question though?
What was the challenge of having kids, and what was a positive? So
another challenge just of having kids is that you learn patience at another level. You really, really do. You don't think I thought I was always pretty patient. I blew it out of the water. When baby's crying at 2 a.m. or whatever, and you're changing a diaper, and you're like, oh my goodness, and you're sleep deprived. Patience has got to grow in order for you to be a halfway decent parent. It's the most humbling thing I've ever done. I always feel like I'm never doing a good job, to be perfectly frank with you. So I'm trying. But, you've got to provide for somebody else. You got to look after them. You've got to make sure that you step into that role with the utmost care and seriousness. And a lot of parents do not do that, and they don't understand the mission at hand, and they don't put their best foot forward. It's one thing to make mistakes. Everybody's going to make mistakes, but unfortunately, a lot of people haven't really embraced parenting in a constructive way. Although a lot of people that we've met here in Skokie, this is very family oriented. And so there's a lot of dutiful parents, and it's wonderful to be in that community because you have people you can relate to, you can talk to, and there's still a lot of other people in this community that I still, get along with on other levels, like my friend Justin, who lives across, the alley. He's a musician, and we have that in common. He worked for Shure Microphones, and they just had their kid, a few years ago. So, we're happy to, give advice or you could share information, because I know that was really helpful for us. So the challenging, I mean, I could go on and on, but those are a few of the challenges. Yeah, for sure.
Okay. My last question is, what expectations did you have when building a family, and how did reality shift those expectations for you?
Okay, first of all, could you repeat the question before again that I just finished answering? I
Yeah.
just want to make sure that.
What was a challenge of having kids, and what was a positive of having kids?
Oh, the positive of having kids is, I mean, my gosh, first of all, those challenges are just a very small, we're just scratching the surface here, but I'll just kind of leave it at those challenges. But the positives are that I've grown in so many ways. In so many ways. Yeah. It's an absolute blessing to be a parent and watch your child grow. Sorry, I'm getting a little emotional. It's some of the most moving experiences I've ever seen. Your birth, I can remember distinctly. Many moments we've had together with you and Eli, watching you grow. It's like watching a flower blossom over decades. It is the most awe-inspiring thing I've ever been a part of, and I'm so grateful that, because I was not really gung-ho about having kids at all until I met your mother, and she's like, well, I gotta know after we're dating. And I was like, well, I was hemming out, and she's like, it's either, there's a phrase that comes to mind, but I don't want to swear, but you either, put up or shut up, basically. And so I decided to jump in, but I thought about it, and I wouldn't have done that unless, as soon as I did, even though we both did it kind of later in life, maybe I may never have. And I'm so grateful that I did. I'm so grateful that I did, because I knew she would be a wonderful mother. But I've grown in so many ways. It's expanded my horizons in terms of the way I look at the world, the way I care about the world, the way having a daughter makes me understand women on a whole nother level that I realized was possible. And understanding myself as a man, watching my son grow, and being able to step in, and being able to advise and guide. It's a blessing, for sure.
Okay.
I could go on and on, but I think that gives you an idea.
All right. So the last question is, what expectations did you have for building a family, and how did reality shift those expectations for you?
That's a really good question. Reality has a way of shifting those expectations. However, my main expectation was to provide. Most importantly, I just wanted to be able to provide my kids with a good family life and community, and allow them to be all that they can be, allow them to be in good schools, and give them opportunity to grow in whatever way that works for them, to be the fullest version of themselves, with some guidance from us and how to have a moral compass, be a decent human being. That's really, really important to both of us. My expectations have been surpassed by being able to move here. It was through the grace of God that we were able to do this, and things lined up the way they did. There were so many variables to moving from Chicago to here. Mm-hmm. It was incredible. It's very hard not for me to think of that as there was some divine intervention. That's always how I've thought about it. That the amount of variables that were needed to line up just so were incredible. So, but how did it reality set in? Because that's a double-edged sword. That could be positive or negative in terms of. I think that Well, I mean, there were bumps along the way. I mean, my goodness, your brother had surgery like the day or two after he was born. I mean, that was intense. Yeah. That was intense. You learn things about yourself and what's important when those type of things happen. But in terms of our expectations, like we didn't know about Skokie, so I spent time in Skokie and just drummed up conversations with people and talked to them, randomly, and said, "How do you like living here?" But in terms of I was concerned about School District 69, and it just so happened that they got a new superintendent just as we were moving in, at 2 new principals, and the schools were like amazing, and they did just a whole lot of positive energy came into those schools just as we were coming. So that exceeded my expectations. But in terms of reality setting in, when we were looking for this place and we were trying to find a way out of the city and find a place that would be appropriate, it was very, very daunting and depressing. We were looking for about 9-10 months. We couldn't find anything either we liked or we could afford. And so that was really tough. And then my mother passed, and my father passed, and then and then Opa passed, and then your parents are not there, but they're with us for sure. I never feel like they're not here. And then you got to step up. I mean, so like when you become a parent, if you care for real about parenting and you're really trying to do the right thing, I mean, you're gonna grow as a human being. You're gonna become a full-fledged adult, whether you like it or not. You've got to really be in there. You've got to be the one to take it on the chin. You've got to be the one, the protector, the provider, the caregiver, the guidance counselor, the whole thing. And you realize the preciousness and the sanctity of life on a whole nother level. I mean, it's really tremendous. It's a beautiful, beautiful thing, and it's also not easy for sure. So, so we're talking about the benefits.
I just said
this was the question before the last question, and it was like, what are the benefits it was like, what were I'm sorry, forgive me, was it the having kids in line with your expectations, and how did reality set in to thwart that? So yeah, I mean, I'm so grateful for what we have here. It's like, it's not like a thing where reality set in and it didn't, it's like, oh, your expectations weren't met, man. My expectations were like blown out of the water. I didn't know how much I'd like living here. I didn't know anything about Skokie. All I knew is, as a Jewish person, like, that's where all the Jews lived. I grew up in Hyde Park. And so, but then we stumbled upon this home on Zillow, and I'm like, I thought it was in Evanston, which we were kind of looking at. The property tax was really high. I had started teaching a little bit at Northwestern. So I'm like, okay, maybe we could just live there or something, And then when we found this place, we're like, oh my gosh, this is beautiful. It's kind of in our price range. And then, like, when we moved here, then we started meeting all these wonderful people. I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. Like, my next door neighbor is like one of the coolest dudes I've ever met, and he's like, we're dear friends. He's like an uncle to my kids. I mean, I didn't expect. I was hoping that it could be half this good, and it was like boom, and I was just like, okay, and I just kind of let it in, because on one hand you've got to like be there for the struggles, but something that I've also learned to do is allow for contribution. A lot of people think like, oh, they got to do it alone. Like, no, you want to help with the kids? Come on, Of course, people that we trust and feel good about. So, was that your last question? How did the reality?
Yeah, I said.
Well, could you just rephrase the question? re-say the question, please.
What expectations did you have when building a family, and how did reality shift those expectations?
Okay, so also my expectations were to, I mean, well, again, I mean, education is really, really important to both your mother and myself, obviously. And we want you to be well-rounded people, and to be thoughtful people, and to be kind people. So, and how did reality shift those expectations?
Yeah, and like in a good way or a bad way.
Yeah, I mean, I guess basically the community, I mean, like, we used to talk about this after we moved in. We're like, okay, locational wise, the way our house is laid out, how I can have a edit studio downstairs and an office upstairs, and you guys can walk to good schools, and we're close to 94, we're close to O'Hare, and we have like places to buy good produce and food, and there's resources and good volleyball and baseball for our kids, and a great school just down the street. We didn't know that this would be the case. We were hoping that, and a wonderful library just down the street. I mean, and so we used to think about, and the other night when, now you're a freshman, and I'm wondering about this new music program. It's been highly touted with the theater and the music, and Niles West is always very good, and Niles West is a great school to begin with. I already knew that going in as part of my research. But when we saw you sing in that group, and all the other ensembles, it's just like, are you kidding me? My heart was bursting. I was so grateful that this man,
De La
Cruz, what's his full name?
Justin Reed De La Cruz.
Justice Reed De La Cruz, the director of the music program. Wonderful. I mean, I was just like, oh my gosh, what a blessing. And most of the teachers that you guys have throughout since you've been here have been really great. So I'm so grateful that you're having an experience that's full and rich in a variety of ways, both educationally, community connectedness, relationship wise. I mean, I'm very happy about that. I'm like grateful beyond grateful, because there's nothing more important. There's nothing. That's why I get up in the morning, for the most part, So, yeah. So, I'm just pleasantly surprised at some of the things that I encounter. Like, oh, the baseball teams, oh, they happen to be pretty good. And oh, the volleyball teams happen to be pretty good. Oh, there's this incredible music program. Oh, and Eli, I met his music teacher who I used to book music, and his piano teacher was at the School of Rock in Evanston, but now, he's Eli's personal teacher, because he created a rapport. Now he's like an uncle to Eli. I mean, it's like, I could go on and on. I'm so happy that I'm very, very grateful, and I don't take it for granted at all. Was that the
that
last
was
question?
The last one.
Okay. Did you have any follow-ups, or was that it?
That's it.
Okay, so this is a series of, this is interview one.
Yeah, I have two
So
more.
I can cut it?
Yeah.
Okay, so